What's going on, Godzirra Nation? This is ArghGodzirra, and today we are doing something that we have never done on the channel before. We are going into uncharted territory. We are treaching uncharted waters. I am very keen to get this underway because a little while ago on one of my Pokemon gameplay videos I made mention to the fact that I want to break away occasionally from gameplays, sticking with the theme of things, but I wanted to start doing things like top 10 lists and reviews and all that kind of stuff, just to take the channel a little bit forward into the future, bring it a little more traction, and be able to do different things that we can all interact with one another with. And I thought, what better way to kick things off than getting involved with something I've seen a fair few PokeTubers getting involved with online, especially somebody that I revere as one of my favourite Pokemon YouTubers currently, and that's aDrive. If you haven't checked him out, go do so. But basically what some of the Pokemon YouTubers have been doing is ranking every single starter Pokemon from Generation 1 right through to the upcoming Generation 8 according to their own preferences, giving it a first, second and a third for the respective 3 Pokemon for each generation. And I thought, what better way to start off the new venture than doing something that I've seen some of my favourite Pokemon YouTubers doing recently. So here we are. We are going to be doing our very own ranking of starter Pokemon from Kanto all the way through to the Galar region. Now, the placement of the Pokemon that you're about to see comes down to my personal preference, whether it be I loved the overall design of that particular Pokemon a little bit more than another, whether I specifically chose that starter for that given generation, whether I feel it's going to help you out a little bit more in that particular game, whether it helped me out particularly in that game, because I have played every single Pokemon main title game from Pokemon Red and Blue all the way up to Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. So I've been able to develop opinions over the space of those years, and you're going to get to experience those opinions with me, and some of them might be unpopular opinions, so bear in mind for that. Before we start, comment section down below, let me know where you would place the starter of every single generation if you were to compile a list like this for yourself. But we're kicking things off with Generation 1, the Kanto region, and for those of you who know me, it's not hard to have worked out that Squirtle was going to be my first preference when it comes to the Kanto region Pokemon starters. I have been in love with Squirtle since I saw the design. The very first Pokemon game I played was Pokemon Blue, so I suppose in that retrospect I've had an affinity for Blastoise and the Squirtle line since the beginning. I just loved being able to bring Squirtle on board. Helps out a lot in the early game, especially against Brock. I mean, you come against Misty as the second gym leader, so it's a bit stalemate there, but you can pick up Pokemon along the way. I just feel, in the grand scheme of things, when it comes to Water-type Pokemon in the Kanto region, Squirtle is the better option. Don't get me wrong, there's plenty of Water-type Pokemon to go with in the Kanto region. You can get yourself a Gyarados, you can get your Lapras, you can get Starmie, you can get Seadra. Plenty of choices, don't get me wrong. But when it comes to Squirtle, I've always rated him as my favourite Kanto starter every single time I've gone back to revisit any kind of game representing the Kanto region. Charmander, I feel, just misses the mark. Every time I went and did another replay and I wanted to change it up, Charmander was always my second choice. I love Charizard as a Pokemon. There aren't really that many decent fire Pokemon that you can get in the early game with some of the Kanto region based games. I mean, you can get a Vulpix to Ninetales, you can get a Growlithe to Arcanine, but outside of that, you're pretty much drawing thin until you can get things like Ponyta or a Magmar. So Charmander, in a lot of retrospects, I would imagine would be well and truly within the top tier of a lot of people's selections. I just personally feel, because I had Squirtle in the top selection, Charmander slots into the second pretty comfortably, which means Bulbasaur for me is the third and final choice. I've never done a gameplay of a Kanto game with Bulbasaur as my starter. I know that's blasphemy. There's a lot of people out there that actually do have a lot of respect for Bulbasaur. I don't mind Bulbasaur, don't get me wrong. I just felt Whenever I did a playthrough, I never really had a grass-type Pokemon in my team. I didn't really have a need or a love for any of the Pokemon of the grass type in the original game. And overall, when it comes to the designs, I preferred the designs of Squirtle and Charmander over Bulbasaur. I don't know. You let me know. But to me, to kick things off, Squirtle takes the #1 spot, Charmander slots in at #2, and Bulbasaur rounds out at #3. Moving on to Generation 2, the Johto region, Pokemon Gold and Silver. And as you can see, Cyndaquil tops my list for the Johto region. And I think that's namely because when it came to Gold and Silver, I wanted an experience that was a little bit different than what I had with Kanto. As I said, I always went with Squirtle for my primary playthroughs. So I thought, why not put the water Pokemon on the back burner for this one? Let's start with a little bit different in the way of the Pokemon I select. And as soon as I looked at the Cyndaquil sprite, I was instantly in love. I loved the design overall. The evolutionary line of Cyndaquil I absolutely love. It had a very good moveset in the original game, not to mention as the games progressed and more competitive battling came into the picture, it had a good moveset for that as well. So overall, Cyndaquil for me took out the #1 spot. Sliding in at #2 was Totodile, who's probably been a bit stiffed because in all retrospects I could quite easily swap Cyndaquil and Totodile around because I love them equally. The design of Totodile was absolutely insane, but as I said, I wanted something a little bit different when I first experienced Gold and Silver. But now, whenever I go back to the Johto region, without a shadow of a doubt, Totodile is the Pokemon I always choose. I've just grown over time with falling in love deeper with this character. In the anime, the comedy relief that Ash has with him, just absolutely great. I loved it so much. The fact that he turns into this big beast alligator that knows sheer force as an ability and can just absolutely wreck anything in its path. It is a very formidable Pokemon. Now that I think about it, I actually am a little bit upset I didn't put it in the #1 spot. But Cyndaquil's always had a special place in my heart. That's why he takes the #1. And as you can see for the #3, we seem to have a common trend going on here because the grass starter again slots in 3rd spot. I didn't really care much for the Chikorita design, to be completely honest with you. It's something with me in grass-type Pokemon. I never really find a need to have a grass-type Pokemon because what can't a water-type Pokemon or an electric-type Pokemon do that a grass Pokemon can't? You tell me. I can balance out type effectiveness and weaknesses without needing to cater for having a grass-type Pokemon. And in Johto, I don't remember ever having to need really a grass-type Pokemon in your team at all. I know in the original Kanto game, Bulbasaur helps out a hell of a lot, especially with the first 2 gyms. But this time around, you're at a bit of a disadvantage in Johto, because don't forget, the very first gym you come up against with Faulkner, that is a flying-type gym, and coming in with a Chikorita could spell doom. I know there's some Chikorita fans out there. I apologise if putting him in 3rd place has upset you. Or her. We don't discriminate here on the channel. So if I do refer to a Pokemon as a him or a her, I'm not doing it to offend anybody. But I just personally feel for me, Chikorita didn't really bring much substance on a personal level to myself. So that's why I've got Chikorita in 3rd. That rounds out my selections for the Johto region. It's time to move on to Hoenn. And Pokemon Ruby and Pokemon Sapphire in general were the 2 Pokemon games that I really got stuck into on a replayable basis. It was on the Game Boy Advance, obviously. Things were starting to get really exciting in the way of the game changing its game style. And for the first time, the Grass-type Pokemon instantly caught my attention. Trico is one of the best designed Pokemon starters in all 8 generations, in my personal opinion. I just love his sassy nature in the anime with the twig in his mouth. Just absolutely spot on. Grovyle looks absolutely insane. Sceptile maybe a little bit to be desired, but the evolutionary line overall of Trico, absolutely amazing. Loved him as soon as I saw him. And although it goes against the grain from what you've seen so far with me hating on grass-type Pokemon, I really can't think of any other place on this list that Trico would be except in the number 1 slot. Number 2 goes to my boy Mudkip. I didn't really like Mudkip at first on first glance, but going back, especially in Pokemon Emerald when I did start with Mudkip as my starter, I come to love Mudkip a lot. Especially the fact that when it evolves into Swampert, you get that ground type. So, you know, people like Pikachu come along trying to cause some damage. Get out of here. I've got some resistance to you. Nice try. Thank you very much. Mudkip overall, I loved Mudkip. Marsh Stomp, maybe not so much. Swampert, just this big beast from the bog that's ready to throw some muddy water left and right. Definitely one of my favourite water type starters overall. Slots in comfortably at number 2. And unfortunately the third spot, I've got to give it to Torchic. Even though I think Blaziken is a very good Pokemon, I just thought Torchic and Combusken left a little bit to be desired. I didn't like the overall design compared to what we had for the fire type starters in the way of Charmander and Cyndaquil. And then to get Torchic, I thought it just fell a little bit short of the mark. And I didn't really ever get around to using Torchic all that much for any of my playthroughs. I just felt that we could use something different in the way of fire-type Pokemon when it came to the Hoenn region. Personal opinion, that's how I feel. That's how my Hoenn lineup rounds out. Turning our attention now to the Sinnoh region, Pokemon Platinum, Pokemon Pearl, Pokemon Diamond. Arguably, probably my favourite generation out of all the Pokemon games. Even though I am a Kanto trainer at heart, I just can't help but love Diamond and Pearl even more every single time I go back. Some of my favourite Pokemon of all time within this region. And as you can see, it was in fact the first time since Generation 1 where I'd loved the water type starter overall. Just loved Piplup. I thought having a cute little water penguin as your starter was absolutely adorable. I went for the cuteness factor, I really did. But then the fact that it turns into a water steel, you know, armored, fortified big penguin with a trident on its forehead and could learn some different moves that we had never seen a water type Pokemon learn before, just made me love the evolutionary line for Piplup even more. Loved Piplup in the anime. Shout out to Dawn and her Piplup. But even though I loved the design of Piplup, it only just marginally holds the first spot over Chimchar, who I've got in second. I loved Chimchar. I've bounced between Piplup and Chimchar a lot when I've gone back to Diamond, Pearl and Platinum. I love the fact he turns into this real speedy monkey that just wants to throw fists and get down. Fighting type, which is something that we had seen with Blaziken, but I personally feel Infernape is a bit better than Blaziken. That's just personal opinion again. Don't forget, that's what this video is all about. But I personally felt Infernape was a better firefighting combination than what Blaziken presented us. And I didn't get upset with the Chimchar, Monferno, Infernape evolution line like I did with the Torchic, Combusken, Blaziken line. Overall, Chimchar, very solid Pokemon. I know there's going to be some people watching that love Chimchar, would easily turn around and say, Zero, what are you doing? Get him into the number 1 slot. That's where you can let me know in the comment section down below, as I said, where you would have these Pokemon placed. But with the water Pokemon returning in the first slot, we've got the grass type returning into the last slot. I just couldn't get around Turtwig at all. I really couldn't. Torterra was a very good design overall for a final. I just felt there was too many comparisons I could draw between Bulbasaur and Turtwig to not want to get involved with Turtwig. I mean, you've got a dinosaur with a bulb on its back, you've got a turtle with a leaf on its head. They eventually turn into something that has something growing on its back. I don't know. I don't know what it is about Turtwig. I've just never really been able to get on board with him. If there's any Turtwig fans out there, let me know, because I want to know what about Turtwig brought you on board with it, because I'm seriously struggling to find some good points here. When it comes to the three of them, Turtwig is the least interesting to me. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because, as I've said before, grass-type Pokemon aren't really my thing. I'm not too sure, but that rounds out my selections for Sinnoh. And we're at the halfway mark officially, moving into Pokemon Black and White, the Unova region. And I'm going to make a comment here that's probably unpopular opinion, but I think some people might be on board with me here. I personally feel the Unova starters are the worst designed starters that Pokemon have presented to us. When it came to these three Pokemon, I thought to myself, we're 5 games deep, they're going to give us something absolutely amazing, especially off the back of Piplup, Chimchar, and Turtwig. And then they gave us Snivy, Oshawott, and Tepig. With these selections, I'm going to be quite honest, it purely came down to who I selected when I played Black and White, who I then selected when I played Black and White 2, and then who I didn't want to touch for obvious reasons. The first time around when I picked up Black and White, I went with Snivy. Out of the 3, definitely has the best design. The Snivy to Superior line is different from what we've seen before. I can get around the design, I can see what they tried to do here. I just feel Unova, in the way of starters, to me personally, was a bit of a letdown. So I don't really have much to say that's really positive about these 3 compared to what I'm going to say about the rest of the Pokemon that appear on this list. I do apologise for that, showing a little bit of bias. But Snivy gets the first place selection purely because I feel out of the 3 has the best design and was the first starter I chose when picking up Black and White. Oshawott slots in at number 2 purely because I think Oshawott is a better Pokemon than Tepig. That's what it really came down to. It came down to, okay, Snivy was the first Pokemon I selected when I'm playing Black and White. When I picked up Black and White 2, I went with Oshawott for something a little bit different, so he slots in at number 2, and clearly Tepig finishes on the bottom because what really was M-Ball? I mean, that was the biggest letdown. Pokemon started going down the path of firefighting, and out of the 3, gave us this fat fucking pig that just, I don't know. I do not know what they were trying to do here. Very lackluster in my opinion, all 3. If I could, I'd probably just forget about Unova all up. I really would. So let's move on to the next one. Generation 6, the Kalos region, Pokemon X and Y. And Pokemon really returned the faith to the Pokemon fans here. They needed to bounce back big time when it came to the designs, given what I've just said about Unova, and I think they well and truly delivered when it came to these selections. I was Team Froakie since the release, when they dropped the first trailer and they showed the 3 starters that are available. You know how they go with Pokemon, they like to tease you now with the 3 starter Pokemon before they really show you any type of gameplay or anything like that. And they posed the question, are you Team Chespin, Team Fennekin, Team Froakie? And I got around Froakie 100%. I thought, okay, we've seen frogs and things like that before in the way of Politoed. You can even go as far as saying the Poliwag line, being the Tadpole line, can be associated with the frogs as well. But I just loved Froakie's design overall. And then Greninja just comes in with his tongue wrapped around his neck like it's a scarf, and he's a boss with his water shurikens, and he knows Protein as an ability so he can turn his typing to the typing of the move he's using. I just loved Froakie so much, and deservingly so. The water type Pokemon returned back to the first slot for Generation 6. Chespin then slides into my second spot. The first grass type Pokemon that slots in at number 2. Loved Chespin's design. I can get around Chestnut, but Quilladin, I seriously don't know what was going on with that. I just think Chespin to Chestnut, you can see the transformation, but Quilladin in the middle kind of threw it off a little bit for me. I loved the moveset Chespin had. I loved, as I said, the design of Chespin overall compared to what we'd seen with Turtwig and Snivy. Kind of brought me back on board. It was probably the best looking grass starter for me since Trico. and I really got on board with that, because when it comes to the design of the starters, that really draws your attention first. And I just thought Chespin, this lovable looking squirrel kind of thing with this armored helmet on his head, and then turns into this big armored beast that can just throw down some hammer fist and go to town. I thought it was absolutely incredible. Love Chespin. Slots in at number 2. And Fennekin finishes in 3rd spot, but not because of the whole reasoning behind Torchic and Tepig. I loved Fennekin's line. I thought Fennekin was a very clever Pokemon. It was the first time that we saw a very feminine kind of Pokemon come out of the starters, and you'll see moving forward there is kind of a feminine touch that now gets given to one of the starter Pokemon. I can get around Delphox, I really can, but just when it came down to selecting these 3, I personally prefer Chespin and Froakie above Fennekin. So it's not knocking Fennekin in any way, because I actually did use Fennekin a couple of times with some of my playthroughs. I just personally rate Froakie and Chespin above Fennekin overall. Time to pack our bags, get some lays, and move over to Alola Generation 7, Pokemon Sun and Moon, Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. And in the number 1 spot, 100% ever since I saw the initial design, was always going to be Rowlet. I thought grass flying, the very first time we had seen something like this, I can get around using a grass type starter again. And then to have it turn into a grass ghost type, that's an archer that shoots ghost-like arrows and uses his wing as kind of like a quiver. Come on, get around that. That is absolutely insane. Without a shadow of a doubt, the best grass type evolutionary line, in my opinion, that we have seen up until this point, alongside Trico, Grovyle and Sceptile. That's how much I love Rowlet. Every single time I played Pokemon Sun, Pokemon Moon, and I started Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, I always went with Rowlet. There is no other place on this list that I would place Rowlet. 150% always will be first place for me when it comes to the Alola region. I've got Litten in 2nd place. An unpopular opinion here as well, because I know a lot of people don't like Incineroar. I personally like Incineroar. I'm a huge wrestling fan, so to see Incineroar turn around what Emboar failed to do was absolutely fantastic. When I heard the rumours that it was going to go down that path, I really thought Litten was going to be a doomed evolutionary line. We'd seen the attempt of doing a fire fighting kind of Pokemon that looked like a wrestler and didn't take off the ground at all. Everybody hates on Tepig so much. They did not fail to deliver with Incineroar. A lot of people don't like Incineroar. I love him. I absolutely do love the Litten line. Although, as I've pointed out, Rowlet being my favourite, there was no way Litten was ever going to overtake him. So that is why Litten slots in at number 2 for me. Popplio slots in at number 3. I just really, when it comes to the design, even though, as you can see with the placement of the water type starters, I do have a tendency to go for the water types above all else. I just felt Popplio, since Oshawott, is probably one of the weakest looking ones. I didn't mind the design going down the water fairy typing with Primarina, which was this generation's feminine take. I just feel with the ones that look a little bit more feminine, maybe it would add a little bit more depth if it was more a genderal kind of thing. So for Popplio and Fennekin, if it was a female, go down the route of Primarina and Delphox. If it's a male, maybe have it break off to a different looking thing just to add a little bit more depth. I don't know. Let me know whether that's something you'd like to see a Pokemon game do, because we've seen genderal variants in Pokemon games and fan games before. I really feel with the more feminine looking Pokemon, not knocking them at all, I just feel maybe adding that little bit more depth and possibility might actually have them over with the fans a little bit more. But Popplio, although I've said I didn't really get around the design, still a very solid Pokemon. I do love the playful nature it has. I just have it really, when it comes down to it, in 3rd spot, because Rowlet and Litten I personally prefer better. And that's how the list has pretty much been developed up until this point. Because it's personal preference, I can put them wherever I want. But we are finishing up with the Galar region. We don't know anything about these Pokemon. We know their names. That's it. We don't know what typing they're going to turn into. We don't know anything else at all. Pokemon Shield, Pokemon Sword coming out later this year. And first and second placing is hard for me at this point because this is just going off of speculation and design of who I prefer. As soon as I saw Sobble, I instantly in my head pictured Water Dragon as its final typing. And even though we've seen Water Dragon Pokemon before, we haven't seen a Water Dragon starter line. And I think it would be sick to have a Water Dragon on your team. That dual ability early game, I reckon that would be absolutely awesome. I personally feel it is going to be Water Dragon because I can picture Sobble being this real timid Pokemon to start with, gets pushed over by everyone, but then in its final form, he's just a Pokemon that you don't want to mess with, just would absolutely tear other Pokemon to shreds. That's my hope. I can also see it going down the Water Ghost kind of line, which I don't mind because I'm a fan of Ghost type Pokemon, so I can get around that as well. But every time I think Sobble is my first choice, I keep looking at Grookey, and if history dictates anything, Grookey probably will be looking at the one that gets the more feminine final evolution here, because we've seen a fire type and a water type previous in the last 2 generations prior get it, so it just makes sense that the grass type gets it this type around. But I just envision Grookey as being a Pokemon that has the twig in its hair turned into a club, and it's a big brute gorilla that just swings his club around. But there's a lot of rumors going around that Grookey has ties to music, so they're thinking that maybe it'll be like a Pied Piper kind of Pokemon and it uses the twig as like a flute. I don't know. It can go any way with these Pokemon designs. We don't have anything apart from that initial little reveal trailer that we've got with the 3 of them kind of interacting with each other. So it's all up in the air. But I've been between Sobble and Grookey back and forth, back and forth. Sobble at the moment for me is the front runner, and I think probably deep down has been. Grookey is growing on me a lot more. I think I might need to see a little bit before I make a solid decision between those two. But Scorbunny to me just doesn't give me the same feels that Sobble and Grookey does. I could probably go into a decision between these 3 and happily exclude Scorbunny from the situation. Even though there's some good possible typings people have been throwing around, it could be Fire Electric, it could be Fire Steel. We could see some very unique things happen with Scorbunny. But when it comes to the design overall, and that's all we can really work off, I just prefer the Sobble and Grookey designs more so than the Scorbunny design. And that's why I've got Scorbunny in last place for the Galar region. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we've done it. We have wrapped up ranking all the starters from Generation 1 to Generation 8. It took me a little bit longer than I thought it would be, but it's something that I'm looking at doing more often on the channel, being able to do rankings like this, and we can do some top 10s for different things, like top 10 Kanto Pokemon, or top 10 Water Pokemon, you know, stuff like that. If you want to see things like that on the channel, let me know down below. Give me some ideas. Throw some ideas around with me to help generate this noise. I want to start doing some different content on the channel. This, hopefully, will kickstart things in a very positive way. Thank you for joining me as always, guys. As I said, let me know in the comment section down below where you rank the Pokemon starters from Generation 1 through to Generation 8. Leave a like on the video if you did enjoy. It goes a long way to supporting myself, and I cannot thank you guys enough for that. Hit that notification bell before you leave so you get notified every single time a new video hits the channel. And if you haven't done so already, you can pledge your allegiance to the Godzirra Nation by hitting that subscribe button, which is right next to the bell. So you're doing yourself a favour by hitting them one after the other. All my social media links are down below in the description. You can hit me up on those. But that's it from me, guys. I'm out of here, and as always, I will catch you guys next time.